But Shane,
Right.
John and I saw Harley race in June. Obviously was not looking in the greatest of health, but still had that fighting spirit. You could see, he was trying everything he could to be at all the conventions and all the shows that he could absolutely make it out to. Unfortunately, that also may have led to what kind of caused this last illness that led to his passing happen, which is very unfortunate. But Shane, please kind of share with us the recollections you have of the handsome one, the King Harley Race.
Well, he was one of those guys that, for where I lived in Pittsburgh, I could read about him every month in the wrestling magazines and followed him closely because of being world champion and the multiple title runs. But I could never see him, until cable came in 1976. And once cable came in and we were able to get Superstation, and now you're watching this guy, like to be honest, and I don't mean this in any condescending way, but looking at Harley, in comparison, like say a Bruno or, other wrestling champions that I had watched, Harley didn't look like a wrestler. He looked more like a truck driver, or a blue collar worker somewhere. And then when I finally got the chance to see him wrestle, my God, he was eloquent. And everything he did made sense. Everything he did had a purpose. And so when you would watch him wrestle, he might turn and just, rub the side of his head. Rush to Short, a few minutes later in that match, rubbing the side of his head made sense. There was some reason for it. And, when you hear the stories from the guys that were like Tommy Young, who refereed them, he would tell the story, because keep in mind back then the NWA champions like Flair later and the NWA champions up to that point, you were traveling the country. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to wrestle in, like the WWF was basically Northeast. The NWA, the like Crockett Promotions was generally Southeast. But as NWA champion, you had to be in Dallas one day, St. Louis the next, crisscrossing the country and constantly going around and always working whoever the top dog was in that territory. And, you had no proficiency of knowing what this guy did, how he wrestled, what were his moves. The fact that the NWA champions like Harley could go and do that, and Flair later, and did, you go back and you watch Flair and Kerry Von Erich in Dallas Stadium, just magic. And, realize what the travel demands for these guys. And again, not knowing, if I'm in ECW and I'm watching Taz wrestle for a couple years before I wrestle, I know his moves as well as he knows them. But if I'm just walking into ECW from another territory, and I've seen probably a couple matches of this guy, but I don't know his arsenal, and I don't know how he goes into and out of certain moves and that kind of thing. And Tommy Young gave what I thought was probably the most respectful commentary you could on this, when he said Harley would go in and wrestle. He would be dog tired from having wrestled late the night before and then had to get up early to catch the flight to get to where it was going. That he would he had certain ways of communicating with Tommy. Tommy Young would always be the referee that traveled with them. And Tommy said he never once ever said no to anybody's moves, and he would seamlessly work their moves in. And, I thought, like, from a performer and a champion's point of view, that was about as nice a thing as you could say about somebody, because it meant, hey, I'm not just coming here to be Harley Race. I'm coming to be Harley Race wrestling the guy that everybody's familiar with. And that is not an easy thing to do, especially when you're tired, especially when you've been on the road for 350 days and you're tired and exhausted and you haven't been home for so long. But Harley was like a throwback to that, to the earlier generations that saw this business as a business. And professionalism was standard number one that they all exhibited. It wasn't like, hey, I'm tired, so let's go out there and take it easy or whatever, like I heard so often in WWF. That was irrelevant to Harley. It didn't matter if it was a packed house or half a house. Harley went out and wrestled his ass off every night, and he carried that later. That guy didn't just forget that when he went to the WWF and they put him in the stupid king thing, right? And that is the next point I'll talk about. Like, for me, getting put in a stupid gimmick that doesn't make sense. For a dumb hothead like me, says fuck it, it ain't gonna work. And but then you see like him or Dusty, Dusty getting put in polka dots, and with a valet that had zero experience in the wrestling business. Instead of saying fuck it, Dusty said, I'm gonna make this work, and he did. Harley did the same thing with the King gimmick, the King of the Ring. It just looks silly, right? You're going out there with a crown on your head and a throne. It just for a guy from where I come from in the business, it just looks dumb. And yet Harley went out and made that work, and which is the same thing he did with going to wherever it was he was wrestling the local stud in the NWA. That is from a performer standpoint, to make anything work, no matter how bad. That is something that very few of the guys have and had, non-existent today, but then that, like I said, from a performer standpoint, it always makes me take a step back and say, like, wow, kudos, bow down, because it's just an incredibly impressive thing from a standpoint of performance. And when I first met Harley, when I first went up there to do the jobs, and like I said about Bundy, Chris, Harley, would come over, not a very talkative guy, but he'd come over after a match and say, kid, good job tonight. And like, to come from Harley Race, that was like, wow, Harley Race just put me over. Like, I went out there and got my ass beat, but I did a good job doing it. And, a lot of guys, as small a thing as that was, understand that was very, very seldom that those top guys would even talk to you. Some of them because of personalities or lack thereof. Others because they're just so damn busy. And yet others because they're tired. Just want to get through the taping and get back to the hotel room because they've been on the road for 9 million days. Harley was one of those guys that would take the time to just say something to you to make you feel good about being there. Walking through that curtain, especially them, as a young, unknown kid, skinny kid, everybody, as soon as you go to that curtain, everybody knows you're going to get your ass beat. And, you're walking to the ring and you got 10,000 people, you suck, you're going to get your ass beat. It's a, really daunting thing. When you're at that point of your career, you're still very unsure of yourself. So to walk into the dressing room and have a Harley Race or a King Kong Bundy or whoever acknowledge you that you're even there, because most of them would look at you like you're invisible. But Harley always did that. And then later, once, I became a mainstay on the road, I got to know Harley much, much closer than I did then. What a great guy. And if you had any hang up in your head, like, how can I transition out of this heat spot, or what, all you had to do is go ask Harley. And it didn't take him 10, 15 minutes to come up with it. He'd say, well, why don't you try something like this? And just like I said with Steamboat, when he was giving me ideas, I could see it in my head what he was saying, like a movie playing. And when Harley would start to talk, you'd listen to it and you'd see it and go, oh my God, that's brilliant. So simple, but brilliant. He was literally a walking encyclopedia of our business. And just from years and years and years of being on the road and doing it. Those were the guys that always impressed me. The guys that could take anything that was good, bad, or ugly and make it brilliant, make it work. And Harley was that guy. Now, one of the things about Harley that very few people would probably know about, and I'm sure most of the fans don't know this about Harley, is that Harley was a little gremlin. He loved to practical joke. but not like the mean practical jokes. In later years, like when he was managing Vader, he always carried around a taser, 40,000-watt taser.
That's
And he'd
normal.
walk up to you and zap you on the butt with it, or he'd play like he was going to zap you with it, And another thing about Harley was the heaviest foot in driving history. He would make a 300-mile trip in about 2 hours.
Damn.
Vader'd get out of that car and he'd be white, it didn't matter. It was pouring down rain, snow, sleet, hail. It didn't matter. He was getting in that car and driving. He wasn't going to piss around and be stuck in a car all day, and would drive like a madman. And I thought, man, it's scary stuff. If Vader's scared, then that must have been a pretty scary trip. Definitely a giant of our business gone. And like you said in the lead-in with this, these guys that we all grew up watching, that built our love of this business, they truly are giants. And we all walk on the shoulders of giants in this business, and we're losing so many of them. I mean, obviously they're getting older. We're all going to be dead one day. But as stupid as it sounds, for a guy like me that looks up to these guys in an exalted way, because so much respect for all of them, to see them leaving at such a pace, as silly as it sounds, I didn't believe these guys could die. The word you used, gods. They were gods to me. I mean, these were the guys that, as I was a young kid loving this business, looking and watching it as much as I could, and seeing these guys, and then never in a million years dreaming that one day I'd get to meet them, let alone learn from them, and work with many of them, is far more. If you could take me back to being that 6-7-year-old kid watching studio wrestling here in Pittsburgh, or that 13-year-old kid finally getting to watch Harley on Superstation. If you had told those kids that one day you're going to know these guys and get to rub shoulders and elbows with them and learn from them and get ribbed by them and all the other things that go with that, I would have laughed at you. I would have never believed it possible, and yet I did. And to see now so many, Bundy and Bruno and Piper and Bockwinkel and now Harley and so many more. I mean, we know we're going to lose more. I mean, it's become a standard thing in this business. But when one like a Harley comes around, it kicks you, because it makes you realize that everybody's mortal, and that none of us are going to stick around forever. But in some small way, his fans and even people that didn't know him can now get a chance to go back and watch his stuff and see how truly eloquent he was in the ring. And it just popped in my head as I'm talking. It sounds like I'm jumping all over the place, but go back and watch. I'm sure you can find it online now. The matches that he and Bob Backlund had in Japan. This was a really difficult thing to pull off well, because you got WWF versus NWA. Neither can really do the job, because then it looks like the NWA is better than them, or WWF is better than the NWA. Go back and watch how well those guys did with those matches. They weren't boring. They didn't come across as a foregone conclusion. They kept you at the edge of your seat. And again, from a performer and a champion's point of view, that is an almost impossible Herculean task to pull off. And yet they did it, and did it so well. And I would dare say, taking nothing away from Bob, that was probably Harley's doing. Bob certainly put his stuff in, I'm sure. But I'm also sure that he gave due deference to it being Harley race. And the fact that could go out there, Bob could go out there and knew he could trust Harley, I think says more for what kind of guy Harley was than, you know, giving some standard pat, hey, he was a great guy, or he's a brilliant guy, or he's a brilliant performer. Those are the types of things that I look at and really stand in awe of, because that none of that stuff is easy. You know, imagine today, I can't even tell you who the champion is right now in WWF, but imagine them going and wrestling, you know, me and ECW or whoever was champion at the time in WCW. You know, the logistics would be a nightmare just in even negotiating it. Then to pull it off, you know, everybody's going to the ring thinking this guy's going to try to get slick and pulling over on me. And so you've got two performers instead of working together, working against each other. And yet somehow Harley and Bob pulled that off and did an incredible job with it. Again, from a performer's point of view, I'm on my knees right now, giving the bow down, because that's incredible.